Welcome to another edition of Around the Table with Stacy Smith as we take a look at the political scene. Elections are always compared to horse races, and if that analogy is to be used, then they have just rounded the final turn and are now just a few furlongs away from the finish line. And depending on which race you analyze, it would appear that in one statewide race, one candidate has a solid lead. And in the other statewide race, it would appear to be going down to a photo finish by the candidates. So I've asked my panel of political analysts to place their bets a week out from the election, and it's now time to find out what they think. The panelists are former governor of Pennsylvania, Republican Tom Corbett. Mr. Corbett also served as a state attorney general for the state of Pennsylvania and also the U.S. attorney for the Western District of Pennsylvania. Mr. Corbett teaches law at Duquesne University and also practices law here in the city of Pittsburgh. Jim Byrne is the former chairman of the state Democratic Party, but he's now the chairman emeritus of the Democratic Party in Pennsylvania. Jim also served as president of the Allegheny County Council, also mayor of Millvale, and Jim is an attorney in town. As we go around the table, we find Keith Schmidt. Keith's background goes back to the Reagan presidency and is delving into politics. And Keith was the state director for former Republican Senator Rick Santorum for the state of Pennsylvania. Also, he was a consultant to Santorum's 2012 presidential bid. Mr. Mr. Keith Schmidt has a consulting firm of his own right now. And seated across the table on the Democratic side is someone who I like to call the great philosopher of Around the Table, Joe Mystic. Joe is a guiding light for a lot of Democrats and has consulted on campaigns across the state. He also served in several roles in city government, including that as deputy mayor. Joe teaches law right now at Duquesne University, and you can read his thoughts on life and politics in the Trib. Gentlemen, thanks so much for being with us, including you, Mr. Keith Schmidt. I appreciate you being here with us today. So
yes, sir.
Let's start with what is believed to be the easiest race to call. Governor Corbett, you once occupied the governor's mansion in Harrisburg. Now, who is going to occupy that mansion come January?
Well, I'll go back 8 years ago. You can't wait for this week to get over if you're the candidate. And I'm sure that Attorney General Shapiro feels the same way. I would say he's going to make it easily. If he were to lose it, it would, in my opinion, be the greatest upset in recent memory.
Anybody want to jump in?
Yeah, I agree, Governor. I remember, 8 years ago, you wait for that final week, and by then, the die are cast. You get to election night, and whatever's going to happen is going to happen. I don't know if you recall, sir, but the night of the election, I bumped into you over at the Carlton. I was in Pittsburgh, and I think you were out for dinner, and I was there as well. Whatever was going to happen was going to happen, and we had a very pleasant exchange and a talk. And I think everybody that was there in that moment felt relieved that within a few hours we would know the result one way or the other. And I think both sides are getting to that point. But having said that, the principals are looking forward to this to be over. The campaign staffs are as well. But it would be the upset of the century for Governor. Josh has been planning for this for years. And he put a team of some of the best in the state and in the country around him. He organized, and the amazing thing is when we were running against the governor in 2014, we had a crowded field in the primary. We had 4 candidates. We weren't able to unify behind one. Josh was able to clear the field in an unprecedented fashion. So we didn't have a contested primary. We didn't have any pun intended loose chads hanging around that the Republicans could use against us in the fall. There were no sound bites from an opponent that could be used against the general election candidate. So all those things being said, plus the division we saw in the GOP in this race, it was hard for them to come back together around the candidate that is considered flawed by many, even in his own party. I would be shocked, gentlemen, if the Shapiro race wasn't called within 5 minutes after 8 p.m. next Tuesday.
Well, the problems that you folks had in 2014, obviously we had. I think we lack real leadership in the Republican Party in Pennsylvania right now, and I hope that's addressed forthwith, and we see some change in the years to come. But right now we had a field of, at one time, 12 candidates. It dwindled to 11. I think we ended up going to the election day with 8, and we ended up getting a fringe candidate, an ultra conservative that has inability to raise money and will come up short on election day. The frustrating thing is I think we squandered a huge opportunity. I don't believe that Josh Shapiro is a populist. I saw him take 2 weeks to win an election that no one ever lost re-election to as Attorney General to a virtual unknown here in Western Pennsylvania to be declared the winner. I suggest, and said many times on this program, that they cleared the field because all the good Democrats thought it was a Republican year. It was a two-term Democrat. It was a midterm for an unpopular president. Let Josh run. Well, timing is everything. Now Josh has handily outspent his opponent, outworked his opponent, and will now be the next governor of Pennsylvania.
I think Josh probably would have been our gubernatorial candidate under any circumstance. It's a natural progression to ask Governor Corbett from state attorney general.
Not natural. I was the first one that did it.
Well, it's natural after you then. Okay,
Okay.
You
made it
plowed the road.
Yeah.
You
But,
plowed the road.
and I think he would have been it would have been easily to have gone extreme against the extreme positions that Mastriano had been taking, but he kept a middle of the road, steady as she goes kind of campaign. He's been steady and even throughout this thing, and it's really to his credit. And I think that's the key to what should be an impressive victory in a year that Democrats often have to struggle in.
Let me ask this mainly for you, Joe and Jim, if Keith is right, and if the Republicans had nominated someone else other than Mastriano, perhaps someone who was more in the middle of the road, if we can call it that, and as far as politics go these days, would Shapiro still be this heavily favored?
No, I would say it could be. I mean, hypothetically, it would most likely be a closer race. When you have someone as extreme as Mastriano, we've not seen anybody like that at the head of a ticket, a statewide ticket. It's really pretty unbelievable. Some of the positions he's taken. He's not even tipped his hat to people near the middle. He stayed far right throughout the whole thing, and that's hard to explain, hard to understand, but it would have been a different race indeed.
I agree with Joe. We've talked often and we'll continue to talk about the red shirt, blue shirt. The numbers of the red shirt, blue shirt are very close. It's when we get to the independents, and most people don't realize this. We have 1.3 million people registered to another party or listed themselves as independent. And I think with a different kind of candidate that appealed more to the middle than Mr. Mastriano does, this race would be close. And some of that has to do with 8 years of a Democrat governor. The midterms, as people have talked about, it would be a much closer race than it is today.
Now, let me comment on that one more time, though, but on what the governor just said. He's convinced me, Governor Corbett has convinced me that we should allow independents to pick what party they want to vote for in the primary election. I think that will be the key to the future, and you won't see Doug Mastrianos heading up the ticket of a major party in the future if that happens.
It's a major consideration right now. If independents and non-affiliates were allowed to vote in this primary, I suspect that the Republicans would have had a different nominee. And if they would have cleared the field a little bit more earlier, I am convinced they would have had a different nominee. That is a conversation being had in both parties right now about whether or not to open the primary. And many folks in both parties who I never thought I would hear them say it are now saying we need to significantly consider the possibility of an open primary. I think that would have changed the narrative. And I think if you're getting extreme candidates on either side winning, then they have to run to the middle in the general, and the opposite side uses that to contradict them. You'll start to see less of that. And if this is something that we are going to do, then I think what will happen is you talk about that 20-yard line to midfield where people just want to get good government and get good deals and move the ball down the field. Those candidates will start to make a comeback. You query whether or not some of the moderate Republicans or Democrats who did great things would win in a primary today.
All right.
Oxygen is the fuel of any race, especially when it's the fifth largest state in the union. And the fact that by estimates, he's been outspent 10-1 with coordinated maybe 20-1, it's hard to put your arms around the fact that it's even at all competitive. I mean, this race is a lot tighter than any of us could imagine. And for that reason, I would think that if he had oxygen and he had more money, this could be dangerously close. Somebody like a fringe candidate like this, an ultra conservative, is competing right now in a state that he shouldn't compete in, especially with the fact that I think the National Governors Association, the Republican, for the first time in our lifetime, did not engage in Pennsylvania. I mean, Pennsylvania is the Keystone State. They've always played here. They decided not to play here this year. So you'd have to scratch your head and wonder if Mastriano did have more of a bankroll would this race be interesting? And that would, in my opinion, would be unfortunate because even as a Republican, he's not the face that I want to see represent Pennsylvania.
All right, we do have to take a break. We'll be back in just a moment.